You will see more than 150 amazing historical photos. Let's get 1,000 subscribers on this channel. I will be very grateful to you. In 1918, legendary sharpshooter Annie Oakley taught women how to use firearms for home defense. She could shoot a playing card edge-on and hit targets while looking through a mirror. Amelia Earhart chose expert navigator Fred Noonan for her flight around the world, but they vanished near Howland Island in July 1937. Later research suggested Noonan may have used a faulty map that placed the tiny island miles from its true location. Andre the Giant grew so rapidly that he reportedly stood over 6 feet tall and weighed 240 pounds by age 12. His enormous hands were so large that a silver dollar could fit through one of his rings. At 4:15 in the morning on June 4, 1953, the climax nuclear test exploded 406 meters above the Nevada test site. Its 61 kiloton blast was about 4 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. In 1909, the White House installed an enormous custom bathtub for President William Howard Taft, who weighed more than 300 pounds. This famous photograph shows 4 workers sitting inside a similar giant tub to prove its incredible size. In 1989, Kenyan President Daniel Arap Moi set fire to 12 tons of seized ivory in Nairobi National Park. The dramatic act, proposed by conservationist Richard Leakey, shocked the world and declared that elephant tusks were worthless unless left on living elephants. Mary Ann Bevan is pictured on the far left with her 4 children after acromegaly dramatically changed her face. After her husband died, she entered an Ugliest Woman contest and joined a circus to keep her children out of poverty. During the Second World War, firefighters battle a raging blaze after an air raid on Great Yarmouth. The coastal town was repeatedly bombed because its port and naval facilities made it a strategic German target. On May 6, 1986, crowds gathered for a bicycle race in Kiev, unaware of the danger in the air. A northern wind was carrying radioactive contamination from the burning Chernobyl nuclear power plant directly toward the Ukrainian capital. After the 1938 Anschluss, Nazi guards forced Jewish men to scrub Vienna's Hagenmüllergasse, while spectators laughed and watched them being kicked for 2 hours. 19-year-old Rudolf Stern, second from the right, later recalled how a Nazi took him from his family's shop. On May 2, 1970, National Guardsmen surrounded Kent State's burning Reserve Officers Training Corps building after anti-war protesters set it ablaze. Firefighters trying to stop the flames were hit with rocks, and 2 days later, the Guard killed 4 students. In 1958, 16-year-old Leslie Arnold showed Nebraska police where he had buried his parents after murdering them. Sentenced to life, he escaped 10 years later and lived under a false identity in Australia for decades, with his family learning the truth only after his death. Sylvia Porter was a famous sideshow performer whose condition caused extreme swelling and severe pain in her legs and feet. Proud and outspoken, she supported co-workers losing their jobs, but refused tours through cold places because the weather worsened her suffering. Tsutomu Miyazaki abducted and murdered 4 young girls in Tokyo and Saitama between August 1988 and June 1989. The photograph on the right shows his deformed hand, a detail that later drew intense public attention during one of Japan's most notorious criminal cases. This photograph from Srinagar in 1969 shows an Indian woman living with leprosy, an infection that can damage nerves and cause permanent injuries. Although treatment existed, many patients still faced isolation, fear, and severe social stigma. On May 18, 1980, photographer Robert Landsberg captured Mount St. Helens as its deadly ash cloud rushed toward him. Unable to escape, he shielded the film with his body, and rescuers found his remains 17 days later with the photographs intact. This huge iron cage guarded graves at Paisley Abbey in Scotland from body snatchers. Between the 1700s and 1800s, thieves stole fresh corpses and sold them to medical schools for dissection. At 14, George Stinney Jr. was convicted by an all-white jury after a trial lasting only hours and a 10-minute deliberation, then executed in 1944. 70 years later, a judge overturned the verdict, declaring that his constitutional rights had been violated. When a tornado destroyed this Oklahoma bank, 10 employees and 5 visitors survived inside its vault. The building was reduced to rubble, but the steel safe remained standing. Hrisantos was a feared gang leader and serial killer who terrorized occupied Istanbul in 1920. He was blamed for 21 deaths, including those of 13 police officers, before police finally killed him. On February 15, 1933, Giuseppe Zangara fired 5 shots at President-elect Franklin Roosevelt in Miami, but missed him. 5 people were wounded, and Chicago Mayor Anton Chermak later died from his injuries. Robert Wadlow, the tallest person ever recorded, drew this huge crowd in Roaring Spring on June 24, 1939. He stood 8 feet 8 and 1/2 inches tall and weighed 491 pounds. In 1968, a Japan Airlines jet landed in San Francisco Bay, 2.5 miles short of the runway, yet all 107 people survived without injury. Captain Kohei Aso accepted full blame while the aircraft was recovered, repaired, and returned to service. In 1996, floodwaters swallowed the streets of Brookville in Jefferson County, leaving cars nearly buried and homes surrounded. The disaster turned an ordinary neighborhood into a dangerous waterway. This aerial photograph shows Hiroshima burning after the atomic bombing on August 6, 1945. An American reconnaissance plane captured the massive smoke cloud from about 25,000 feet above the devastated city. On March 18, 1984, a driver crashed this car into a motel pool in Costa Mesa, California. Police arrested the driver on suspicion of driving while intoxicated, leaving guests staring at a full-size car among the pool chairs. Born in Iowa in 1912 with sacral agenesis, John Gilmore had no functional lower body and walked on his hands. Known on stage as Zandu, he became a popular American sideshow performer and amazed audiences by playing electric guitar. On February 7, 1991, the Provisional Irish Republican Army fired 3 homemade mortar shells from this van at 10 Downing Street. One exploded in the garden just 30 yards from Prime Minister John Major and his cabinet, but none of them were injured. Frances Francine Hotchkiss was bullied almost every day as a child because of a condition that gave her masculine traits. Her mother later pushed her into sideshow work, and she became a well-known performer during the 1930s and 1940s. Just 3 days after the atomic bomb destroyed Hiroshima, streetcars began running again, and this 1946 photograph shows one crossing the ruins beside new survivor-built homes. Behind it stands the shattered building now called the Atomic Bomb Dome, preserved as a permanent warning against nuclear war. British police use a massive battering ram to break into a tenant's home during an eviction in Ireland in 1888. Such forced evictions became a brutal symbol of the Irish Land War, when tenants resisted landlords over high rents and insecure leases. A medic from the United States 2nd Armored Division treats a wounded German soldier during the Second World War. His 48th Armored Medical Battalion cared for casualties near the front, including injured enemy prisoners. This photograph shows Mata Hari shortly after French authorities arrested her in Paris in 1917, accusing her of spying for Germany. The famous dancer denied being a double agent, but a military court convicted her, and she was executed by firing squad 8 months later. In August 1951, professors in Lubbock, Texas, reported blue-green lights racing silently across the sky in strange formations. Student Carl Hart Jr. photographed them, but the United States Air Force investigation never reached a final explanation. This is the Soviet cargo ship Pyotr Vasev after it struck the passenger liner Admiral Nakimov near Novorossiysk on August 31, 1986. The liner sank in only 7 minutes, killing 423 people. A little girl clings to her mother during the evacuation of children from Leningrad in 1941. Many children were first sent south, directly toward the advancing German army, forcing thousands to endure a second desperate evacuation. On September 3, 1939, this newspaper boy announced that Britain had declared war on Germany. He sold copies of the News of the World as crowds rushed to learn that their country had entered the Second World War. In 1904, people labeled with the cruel term idiots were confined at Earlswood Asylum in England. This rare photograph shows residents making brushes in a workshop where unpaid labor was presented as education and treatment. Jack Smith was left disabled at 42 after a mine roof crushed his legs during his first year underground. Here, his 16-year-old daughter Donna pushes him through Rodell, West Virginia, while he waits 18 years for compensation. During the Cold War, government pamphlets told families to prepare for nuclear fallout with duct tape, plastic sheets, and canned food. These simple supplies were meant to seal one room from radioactive dust after a nuclear blast. On November 30, 1939, Soviet bombers struck Helsinki on the first day of the Winter War. The raid killed 91 people, wounded hundreds, and helped turn world opinion against the Soviet invasion. In 1957, soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division used fixed bayonets to hold back a hostile crowd outside Central High School in Little Rock. President Eisenhower sent them to protect 9 black students after Arkansas officials tried to block integration. In 1933, a mob smashed into a California jail and lynched 2 men accused of kidnapping and murdering department store Air Brook Hart. Governor James Rolfe praised the killers, claiming their violence had warned every future kidnapper. 14 former Neuengamme concentration camp officials faced a British military court in 1946. 11 were sentenced to death, while the other 3 received prison terms ranging from 10 to 20 years. On November 13, 1963, United States Navy pilot J.M. Bauckham ejected from his Vought Crusader and survived the landing at sea. The rescue helicopter then crashed just 5 kilometers from Oceana Naval Air Station because of engine trouble, and incredibly, Bauckham survived again. Lathe operator Johann Lehner raises his hands after Freikorps soldiers falsely accused him of supporting the Bavarian Soviet Republic in May 1919. Moments after this photograph was taken, the same soldiers murdered him during Germany's brutal post-war political violence. This rare photograph shows a Spitfire intercepting a V-1 flying bomb without firing at close range, where the blast could destroy both aircraft. The pilot slid his wing beneath the bomb's wing, using disturbed airflow to tip it off course and send it crashing away from civilians. In 1976, a child stood among mangrove trees destroyed by Agent Orange after the Vietnam War. The chemical stripped forests bare and contained dioxin, a toxic substance linked to cancers, birth defects, and environmental damage lasting for decades. A United States Marine leads a captured Viet Cong fighter through a rice field in Vietnam in 1967. Behind them, an M48 Patton tank shows the overwhelming firepower used in this brutal and deeply unequal war. Mau Mau suspects sit behind barbed wire in a Kenyan prison camp in November 1952, weeks after Britain declared a state of emergency. Thousands were detained without trial as colonial forces tried to crush the uprising against British rule. At the front in 1917, a soldier has a tooth pulled without a dental chair or modern equipment. His comrades hold him still while the extractor uses simple forceps, showing how brutally basic wartime dentistry could be. On November 14, 1970, a charter plane carrying the Marshall University football team crashed into a West Virginia hillside after striking trees. All 75 people aboard died, including 37 players, making it the deadliest tragedy in American sports history. In August 1944, the Polish Home Army launched the Warsaw Uprising, expecting to liberate the capital before Soviet troops arrived. Germany crushed the rebellion after 63 days, killing up to 200,000 civilians and destroying most of Warsaw. This photo shows Pan Am Flight 1736 behind the KLM Boeing 747 at Tenerife Airport in 1977. Minutes later, the two jets collided on the runway, killing 583 people in history's deadliest aviation accident. Amelia Earhart and navigator Fred Noonan posed beside their plane shortly before attempting to circle the globe. On July 2, 1937, they vanished over the Pacific, leaving behind one of aviation's greatest unsolved mysteries. At 23, Rosemary Kennedy, sister of John and Robert Kennedy, was forced to undergo a lobotomy arranged by her father. The operation destroyed her ability to speak and walk normally, and she spent the rest of her life in institutional care. From 1957 to 1971, Edward Paynell broke into homes in Jersey and attacked people who were alone. Wearing a rubber mask and a nail-studded coat, he became the terrifying criminal known as the Beast of Jersey. German forces wrecked the tracks at Topčider Station in Belgrade on October 12, 1944, trying to slow the advancing Red Army and Yugoslav partisans. 8 days later, Belgrade was liberated. In 1940, Adolf Hitler returned to the trenches near Fromelles, where he had served as a soldier during the First World War. He visited just days after France surrendered to Germany, turning his former battlefield into a symbol of revenge. Sid Hatfield was the police chief of Matewan, West Virginia, who refused to crush striking miners and openly defended them. In 1921, gunmen from the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency murdered him in broad daylight on the courthouse steps. On November 10, 1865, Andersonville prison commander Henry Wirtz was hanged after being convicted of conspiracy and murder. Nearly 13,000 Union prisoners had died there from disease, starvation, overcrowding, and filthy water. Crewman Fred Hansen took this photograph as the SS Vestris tilted sharply and passengers struggled to lower the lifeboats on November 12, 1928. At least 111 people died, including all 13 children, after several lifeboats failed during the evacuation. In 1959, serial killer Harvey Glattman was executed in San Quentin's gas chamber. Posing as a crime magazine photographer, he bound women for staged pictures, then assaulted and murdered 3 victims before a 4th escaped and helped police capture him. A British soldier confronts a German woman reportedly caught laughing during a forced screening of concentration camp footage. She was removed, then ordered back inside to watch the evidence of Nazi crimes again. John F. Kennedy was assassinated on November 22, 1963, and this is Commission Exhibit 399. Investigators said this bullet passed through Kennedy and wounded Governor John Connally, yet it remained almost completely intact. On March 11, 1923, 40 hooded Ku Klux Klan members sat openly among worshipers at Grace Methodist Episcopal Church in New Jersey. Their local leader joined Reverend Paris E. Greenlee on the platform as the Klan recruited members and funded churches and colleges to spread its ideology. On January 27, 1945, Soviet soldiers entered Auschwitz and found about 7,000 sick and starving prisoners, including the children in this photograph. More than 600 corpses lay in Birkenau, while 231 Soviet soldiers died fighting to liberate the camp complex. Rocky Dennis was born with craniodiaphyseal dysplasia, a rare disease that severely distorted the bones in his face. Doctors said he would die by 7, but he lived to 16 and inspired the 1985 film Mask. In 1926, Violet Gibson shot Benito Mussolini at close range, but he turned his head and the bullet only grazed his nose. Mussolini appeared in public the next day with a bandage, while Gibson was declared insane and deported to Britain. In 1932, Charles Lindbergh received this chilling ransom note after his 20-month-old son was taken from his bedroom. It claimed the baby was safe, but the child was found dead 10 weeks later. This bullet-riddled car carried Dominican dictator Rafael Trujillo, when assassins ambushed him outside Ciudad Trujillo on May 30th, 1961. Trujillo was hit 7 times, ending a brutal 31-year dictatorship. This private photo shows an American soldier relaxing with a South Vietnamese woman during the Vietnam War. On November 19, 1966, 4 American soldiers kidnapped, raped, and murdered 21-year-old Phan Thi Mao, while a 5th soldier refused to join them and exposed the crime. This 1926 portrait shows Izilphia Mary Watt Flynn at 101, just a year before her death. She and her husband, Richard Flynn, sheltered enslaved people escaping through the Underground Railroad from Chattanooga toward Kentucky. This is the inner courtyard of Newgate Prison in London in 1895, guarded by an armed officer. Newgate held some of Britain's most notorious criminals, and public executions took place outside its walls until 1868. In 1961, police carried 21-year-old John Lewis away during a civil rights protest in Tennessee. After arrests, beatings, and a fractured skull, Lewis watched Barack Obama become president and received a signed note saying, "Because of you, John." A woman poses with her belongings beside the ruins of Berlin in 1945. Allied bombing and the final battle destroyed much of the city, leaving millions of civilians searching for food, shelter, and missing relatives. In 1957, Kurt Diemberger photographed 2 trails on Chogolisa after Herman Buhl stepped off the safe path and broke through a hidden snow cornice. Buhl fell into the abyss, and his body was never recovered. This is Jesse Pomeroy at 65, imprisoned for murdering 2 children in Boston when he was only 14 in 1874. By 1925, he had spent nearly 50 years behind bars, including 41 years in solitary confinement. This is the wrecked car of Edward Easy Eddie O'Hare, Al Capone's lawyer, who secretly helped convict the crime boss. Gunmen killed O'Hare with shotgun blasts while he was driving through Chicago in 1939. Soviet agent Ramon Mercader smashed an ice axe into Leon Trotsky's skull in Mexico City in 1940. Trotsky remained conscious, ordered guards not to kill his attacker, and died the next day. A Roma bear handler uses a trained bear to treat a woman's back in Romania in 1946. This old ritual claimed that the animal's weight and steps could crush pain and drive illness from the body. In 1954, a baker in Kina, Egypt, was publicly whipped for raising bread prices during a famine caused by Nile flooding. The punishment sent a brutal warning to merchants accused of profiting while their neighbors starved. In 1942, the Lastochkin family stood in liberated Rilchevo, wearing identification tags forced on them during the German occupation. In captured Soviet villages, residents had to carry these tags around their necks, revealing exactly where they lived. On July 16, 1945, this crew prepared the gadget, the plutonium bomb used in the world's first nuclear test. Hours later, the Trinity explosion released the force of about 21,000 tons of TNT and changed warfare forever. On September 12, 1960, Hurricane Donna pushed an 11-foot storm tide into New York Harbor. Lower Manhattan flooded nearly waist-deep, turning busy streets into dangerous rivers. Eugen Weidmann became the last person publicly guillotined in France outside a prison in Versailles on June 17, 1939. The crowd's shocking behavior led French authorities to ban public executions. On February 26, 1991, American aircraft destroyed retreating Iraqi convoys on 2 roads leading out of Kuwait. The charred route became known as the Highway of Death, with soldiers and civilians reportedly trapped among thousands of wrecked vehicles. On November 15, 1969, the Soviet submarine K-19 collided with the American submarine Gato while changing depth, badly crushing its bow. Gato's torpedo officer reportedly prepared to attack, believing the collision was a deliberate ramming, but his captain canceled the order. On December 3, 1967, surgeon Christian Barnard performed the first human-to-human heart transplant, giving Louis Washkansky the heart of 25-year-old Denise Darvall. Washkansky survived for 18 days before dying from pneumonia caused by weakened immunity. This rare photograph from 1905 shows a convicted criminal moments before a public beheading in Mongolia. The executioner stands ready with a long sword, while the condemned man kneels with his head forced forward beneath a wooden beam. This Soviet soldier survived 3 bullet strikes to his steel SN-42 chest armor on the Karelian front in 1944. The heavy breastplate could stop pistol rounds and shell fragments, but it offered little protection against powerful rifle fire. This is not Mata Hari's execution, but actress Jean Moreau filming Mata Hari, Agent H-21 in 1964. The real Mata Hari was shot by a French firing squad in 1917, and no photographs of her execution are known to exist. Queen Sunanda Kumariratana was only 19 when her royal boat capsized in 1880, killing her and her young daughter. Witnesses reportedly stood helpless because touching a royal person could mean death, though the official blamed a guard for blocking the rescue. In September 1945, Robert Oppenheimer and General Leslie Groves returned to the Trinity test site, where the first atomic bomb had exploded 2 months earlier. They stood beside the twisted remains of the steel tower that had held the bomb. A Pakistani intelligence officer poses in Afghanistan while a battle between Soviet forces and the Mujahideen erupts behind him. Smoke rises from a fresh explosion, yet he calmly faces the camera as if nothing happened. Seconds after John Kennedy was shot on November 22, 1963, Secret Service agent Clint Hill climbed onto the speeding limousine. He shielded Jacqueline Kennedy as the driver raced toward Parkland Hospital. A Red Army soldier straps a Mosin rifle to a 76mm ZIS 3-field gun during training. The rifle let crews practice aiming and firing without wasting valuable artillery shells. Maurice and Katia Kraft witnessed about 150 eruptions. Filming molten lava from distances few scientists dared to approach. On June 3, 1991, a deadly volcanic cloud from Mount Unzen in Japan killed them and 41 others. In June 1940, German soldiers smashed through a museum wall to remove the railway carriage where Germany had surrendered in 1918. Hitler then forced France to sign its own armistice inside the same carriage, turning Germany's former humiliation into revenge. A Belarusian Calyari performer wears a carved wooden mask and carries a goat figure in the 1930s. During this ancient winter ritual, masked villagers visited homes, sang songs, and used the goat as a symbol of fertility and a rich harvest. A Red Army soldier captures 2 Germans in Berlin in May 1945, including one dressed as a woman. His bizarre disguise was likely an attempt to escape capture as the Third Reich collapsed. In the 1954 World Cup semifinal, Uruguay's Juan Hoberg scored in the 86th minute to force extra time against Hungary, then collapsed beneath his celebrating teammates. He recovered and kept playing, but Hungary scored twice in extra time and won 4-2. These Russian soldiers built fake cannons and dummy crews to draw enemy fire on the Caucasus Front between 1914 and 1917. The decoys tricked Ottoman observers into revealing their artillery positions while real troops remained hidden. On August 15, 1995, Christopher Charles Lightsey was gagged after repeatedly disrupting his sentencing hearing. He received the death penalty for stabbing 76-year-old cancer patient William Compton 42 times and stealing his guns, coins, and other belongings. These emaciated Japanese sailors were captured in the Marshall Islands in September 1945. Cut off from supplies by the Allied blockade, they survived on tiny rations as starvation destroyed isolated Japanese garrisons across the Pacific. On November 10, 1938, Nazis burned Bielefeld Synagogue during Kristallnacht, the nationwide attack on Jewish communities. Firefighters protected nearby buildings but left the synagogue and its sacred interior to burn. During the Budyonovsk hospital hostage crisis in June 1995, doctors wrote their names on their gowns before an expected assault. They feared they would be killed and wanted their bodies to be identified. In 1938, former radium dial painters gathered around Catherine Wolfe Donahue as she lay dying from radiation poisoning at only 35. Their bosses had ordered them to shape radioactive paintbrushes with their lips, then denied the danger as the women lost teeth, suffered shattered jaws, and fought for justice. Nazi racial anthropologist Eva Justin measures the skull of a German Romani woman in 1933, searching for invented signs of racial inferiority. Her measurements later helped justify the persecution and deportation of Roma under the Nazi regime. In Algeria in 1974, Marc Riboud photographed a veiled woman beneath a sign banning short skirts, shorts, and uncovered hair. The image captures how public rules controlled women's clothing while promoting one approved model of family life. This behind-the-scenes photo from the monster that challenged the world shows a young girl calmly posing inside the creature's massive claws. The giant mollusk costume terrified audiences in 1957, but here, its rubber skin and hollow eyes reveal the movie magic. On August 28, 1988, 3 Italian Air Force jets collided while performing the pierced heart maneuver at Ramstein Air Base. Within 7 seconds, one burning jet struck the crowd, killing 3 pilots and 67 spectators and injuring hundreds. In 1895, Italian medium Eusapia Palladino appeared to levitate a table during a séance. Investigators repeatedly caught her using hidden tricks, yet some respected scientists still believed her powers were real. This famous photograph was said to show German soldier Josef Schultz joining prisoners rather than shooting them. Military records say Schultz died in combat 1 day earlier, and a German investigation later rejected the story. In 1984, surgeons gave 12-day-old baby Faye a baboon heart because she was born with a fatal heart defect. She lived for 21 days, but her immune system rejected the heart after a severe blood type mismatch. After a V-1 flying bomb struck London in 1944, rescue workers searched the ruins for survivors. Each pilotless weapon carried an explosive warhead weighing about 850 kilograms and could destroy an entire row of homes. Police arrested this gang during a raid in the United States in 1927. The criminals had disguised themselves as women, hoping their dresses, wigs, and makeup would hide their identities. Let's get 1,000 subscribers on this channel. I will be very grateful to you.